Have you ever felt like your prayers are met with silence? You cry out seeking answers, but all you hear is the echo of your own voice? Sometimes it can feel as though God is distant, uninvolved, or even absent from your life. You wonder, why does God seem silent when I need him the most? This is a feeling that is not foreign to many of us, and it is at the heart of the ancient story of Job, a story that wrestles with the raw reality of disappointment in God. Job was a man blessed beyond measure. He had everything one could desire: wealth, a large family, and good health. He was deeply devoted to God, offering sacrifices regularly on behalf of himself and his children, just in case they had sinned unknowingly. He was respected, prosperous, and admired in his community. Job was a model of righteousness. Yet in an instant, everything changed. One day, without warning, disaster struck. In rapid succession, Job lost his livestock, his wealth, his servants, and most devastatingly, his children. Messengers came to him one after the other, bringing news of destruction and death. His prosperous life was shattered, and his grief was overwhelming. The man who once had it all was left with nothing but ruins and a heart full of sorrow. As if that weren't enough, his health was taken from him too. Job's body became afflicted with painful boils, and he sat in ashes, scraping his sores with broken pottery, utterly broken in spirit and body. Job, the righteous man, the man of great faith, could not comprehend what had happened to him. He had always trusted in God, but now it seemed like God had abandoned him. In his confusion and pain, Job cried out, "Why is life given to those in misery, and life to the bitter in soul?" He lamented that his life had become a burden too heavy to bear. Job's disappointment with God was not just about the loss of his wealth or even his physical suffering. It was about the loss of the relationship he thought he had with God. How could a loving, just God allow such immense suffering to befall someone who had been faithful to him? Job's friends came to comfort him, but instead of offering solace, they questioned his righteousness. They believed that such suffering must have been a result of some hidden sin. They told Job to repent, assuming that God was punishing him. But Job knew this wasn't true. He defended his innocence and wrestled deeply with the idea that he was being unfairly punished. Yet even in his anger, disappointment, and confusion, Job did something remarkable. He didn't turn away from God. He poured out his complaints to God, openly questioning him, but he never cursed God. He held on to his belief that somehow, God was still in control, even if he couldn't understand why. Job's story speaks to the heart of human suffering. It reflects the questions we ask when life doesn't make sense, when the innocent suffer, when the righteous endure hardship, and when God seems silent in our deepest pain. How often do we, like Job, ask, "Why God? Why me? Why now?" Job didn't shy away from these hard questions. He brought his pain, his disappointment, and his confusion directly to God. After days of questioning and silence, God finally responded to Job, but not in the way Job expected. Out of a whirlwind, God spoke, not to explain the reasons for Job's suffering, but to remind Job of his majesty and sovereignty. God asked, "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand." He showed Job the vastness of his creation and his ultimate control over all things. God's message to Job wasn't an explanation of why he had suffered, but a reminder that his ways are higher than ours, his wisdom beyond our comprehension. In that moment, Job's perspective shifted. He realized that even though he didn't understand the reason for his pain, God was still in control, and his purposes were good, even when they were hidden from human eyes. Job's disappointment turned to awe. Though his questions were not fully answered, Job found peace in trusting the God who holds the universe in his hands. He said, "I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted." Job acknowledged that God's ways are beyond human understanding, but that doesn't mean God is indifferent or absent. He realized that even in the midst of suffering, God's presence is constant, and his purposes are still unfolding. In the end, Job's health, wealth, and family were restored to him, but more than that, his faith was restored. Job's story doesn't just teach us about suffering, it teaches us about trust. It shows us that faith isn't just believing when life is easy, it's about holding on to God when life falls apart. Job learned that while he may not understand the why of his suffering, he could trust in the who, the God who sees, knows, and cares for him, even when the answers aren't clear. We too will face seasons of disappointment where life feels unfair and God's presence seems distant. Like Job, we may not always understand why we go through hardship, why our prayers seem unanswered, or why suffering comes even when we've been faithful. But Job's story reminds us that God's plans are still good, even when they're beyond our comprehension. His wisdom is greater than ours, and His love for us is steadfast, even in our darkest moments. So, the next time you find yourself feeling abandoned or disappointed by God, take a step back and ask, can I trust God even when I don't understand? Can I hold on to faith, knowing that God is still working behind the scenes, even in my suffering? If you've been struggling with disappointment, take a step today to talk to God about your pain. Don't hide your feelings from Him. He's big enough to handle your questions and your doubts. Seek His presence in your suffering and trust that He is working even when you can't see it. And as you reflect on this story, share it with someone who needs hope today. Let them know they're not alone in their journey of faith, just as you are not alone in yours. Remember, the God who restored Job's life is the same God who walks with you through every season of disappointment, ready to bring healing, hope, and peace.